That's what we've done in previous years, right? We got the draft in this meeting and then,
No, this is a new opportunity.
oh, are we gonna have another CIP work session?
We have our regular CIP work session in November.
Oh,
Where
wow.
we get the draft.
Oh,
Right now, CIP items have not been submitted.
okay,
And so
Wow.
we added in this opportunity, we're immediately following, council's introduction to the opening of the budget.
okay,
So this is pre that.
cool, all right. We have not been cut out, we're more included than ever.
That is.
Sounds good to me.
The goal is to, Mr. Sanders would really like to get as much information as early as possible, so research can be done along the way.
Okay,
And this was just a check-in point to see if there are things to add into the mix at this level.
okay, cool.
Yes, so you will have a whole work session where there will be, the opportunity, similar to what we've done every
Yep,
year
like the
around
draft and the unfunded
Thanksgiving.
list and all that, cool.
Yep,
I didn't think
Well,
this
that's
was-
not gonna be helpful, answer the question,
okay.
as you might like. I think, because there's so much already in this. that we-
Well, so the one that you have there,
There's less.
you have last year's, just as a reminder, and then, the second PowerPoint. The second PowerPoint
Thanks.
was,
What they did for council.
yes, uh-huh. Copies, right?
Oh, yeah, you did say that about the work session, sorry.
But I'll repeat all of that when we start.
How is the mobile home park, how's it being funded? Is that being funded up CIP? It was $6
The Carlton,
Yeah.
It was like
the
interest.
the 8.75
That capital budget.
million thing. I know they cobbled it together from CIP and other accounts. It wasn't in the budget.
Well, we haven't really paid anything yet,
Yeah,
right?
but
It
we
was like,
agreed to.
we
Yeah.
told them they would, so they could get the loan, and then we promised to pay them like $1 million.
Is that gonna happen in the next fiscal year? Is that something we need to be thinking about today? Well, this.
Since that commitment's been made, you will see that
It's
in the
already done.
documents that come your way.
It's in delivery because it's done.
It's gonna come,
Okay.
yeah, yes, because, hey.
Did you want to deliberate over
Well, I think it's gonna have to be fun way to do it.
Well,
I just wonder how we're gonna pay for it.
the ship sailed, and Chrissy will be spending lots of time making sure that the book's balanced
Moving money around.
with that as a piece of the puzzle, so.
it? No bonds for that one. Can't bond things that we give to PHA. Because they're not, CRHA. yeah, so I think
So they
Well,
they're
do,
getting a loan from a bank that we're gonna pay them to pay the.
yeah,
payments.
there's
It's really funky.
definitely some very creative people involved in putting that together in less than 60
I was
days.
gonna say, it's amazing how quickly look at this up.
It is super amazing.
Baffling how we're paying for the whole thing and not getting control of it at all, though.
So before we start, I do need a disclosure, some sort of, no,
Well, we're almost starting.
but I'm sure.
We have a few of those likely, so. Only person at this
That's
point,
it.
well, she's here, and then.
Hey,
How's it going?
look who's here. Come on, join us.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, actually,
I told you
I'm
all.
trying to remember what
Right.
I said at the meeting and not take notes, so I'm just gonna sit here, listen and be quiet.
I couldn't convince you to actually apply, but you had to,
You didn't apply?
well, we didn't
Just
apply.
not this time. Well, I can talk to you offline about this.
Okay.
I was told some information and then information turned out to not pan out, but
Yeah, it was
anyway.
sad about as you're walking around the gym.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good place to get your information.
All right, Ms. Chrissy, we had a quorum, I think, so you got the lead.
All right, well, I will get us logistic wise and then we'll go from there. All right, well, welcome everybody. Planning Commission work session. We have 2 items on the agenda. Just some logistics in general. We don't have a public comment section for this meeting. If anyone is interested in submitting comments for this, you can email them to me directly. ChrissyM@charlottesville.gov. And we will share those and they'll be part of the record. And if we have any in-person comments, we can provide some paper for that. If you don't want to email me, we provide all sorts of options there. We noted from our last work session, so the microphones here are the ones that are recording our meeting, and you do not have to speak to the ceiling. That is not necessary. But we're gonna remind everyone to speak clearly, so that we can try and record as much as we possibly can. It's a little tougher in this room without the microphones. It works pretty good, but you know, just something to keep in mind. And Patrick will probably nudge me here or there if we're faltering and forgetting that a little bit. So, all right, so that's logistic. We have 2 general topic areas, and given our pre-discussion point before we have gathered, seems like we need a little clarity on what we've got going on tonight, so I will definitely provide that. So I'll start with the capital improvement program. As most of you know, we have a couple new folks, so we'll be bringing them up to speed. Typically, we have a work session in November on the CIP. The CIP the capital improvement plan, it will have been developed, and the manager will be ready to forward it for review and comment through the planning commission. But this year, in order to try and keep the discussion going throughout the entire CIP development process, the council recently, about week or 2 ago, had a budget introduction, where they were basically getting on track for this is the budget season, here are the things that will be involved, here are the priorities, and those have been included in your packet as well. And we were asked to have kind of an early conversation about the CIP at this phase where we haven't started. I mean, people are working through their applications to be turned in. Those are due, departments have those due beginning of October, so it's right around the corner. But an opportunity to just kind of hear from commissioners about CIP thoughts and ideas at the early phase of things. So in your packet, you had a last year's November work session packet. You'll get a similar one at the November work session with updated information, but that was just kind of an example of what we've had in the past. I gave you guys a copy of the memo that you all provided to council. So for our new members and a refresher for all of us, after we hold the CIP work session, we hold a public hearing either in December or January, just kind of depends on the timing of things. And you guys provide recommendations to city council for the CIP portion of the budget. And typically that is more broad-based. You guys are not looking, well, you can't look at the individual line items, but you guys are more so providing comments on concepts that will implement the comprehensive plan. So if you remember in the memo from last year, there was a big interest in making sure that we had adequate sidewalk funding. That's been something that's been very important for a long time. And then you guys reiterated the library project that was of discussion last fall. And so we will go through that normal process. For some of you, that's our norm. For some of you, it will be a new step. But this is really just an opportunity to get some early feedback while the process is just kicking off. So we kind of expected it to be, not too long of a discussion. And we'll take comments down. We received a public comment. We were able to provide some background from Chrissy, and if you all have line item specific questions, we'll get those down and we'll get answers out to you later on those. So that is the overview. On that.
So you're looking for feedback as to prioritization.
Priorities or general, so just as a reminder, we put a couple of thought questions in the memo. And I'll note those and maybe that'll help trigger a few things. Okay, so one was given the broad areas of the CIP, and so we have the major areas in there, including education, facilities, public safety, transportation, parks and rec, affordable housing, technology, infrastructure. What areas should receive consideration in upcoming budget? So that's just a very general, broad question. And then what priorities from the comprehensive plan should be highlighted during this budget cycle? So those are just very, very broad things.
So why don't we just go around the room, or maybe begin with you? If you got nothing, say you got nothing.
I mean, this is my first time going through this process, but my first thought in reading through the CIP or whatever the proposed CIP is that, the comprehensive plan talks a lot in the section about transportation, about kind of managing our roadway network and parking facilities, but really focusing on transit, bicyclists, pedestrians for improvements. And I think there's maybe $700,000 total between new sidewalks, sidewalk repair, and bicycle infrastructure, which doesn't strike me as very much. So that's kind of my first thought. Aside from the Stribling Avenue sidewalk, the 4.2 million, that's a lot of money. But that was my first thought. My second, maybe this is a question, is when Public Works, I know Public Works has gone out and done these like asphalt sidewalk, they fill in little gaps. Is that a capital expense, or are they paying for that out of kind of their operational budget? I'm just wondering if that's accounted for here.
We've had ebbs and flows of that. There was an internal effort a number of years ago to do that, but they found that most of the gaps that are left require more engineering work than possible. So generally they're coming from CIP.
Okay. I didn't know if there was, more money being spent on these kinds of things that aren't reflected in the CIP, but let me just see if I had anything else. And then I guess two questions. What does SIA stand for? SIA Immediate Implementation?
Strategic investment area, it's sort of the area of Friendship Court and Ix. There was a small area plan for it a number of years ago. I think they had talked about in the last budget cycle, or maybe since then, that is now just going to become the small area plan implementation account. So not specifically for that small area plan, but for all the small area plans.
Okay. And then neighborhood transportation improvements, 100,000. for the next 4 years? Do you know what that
I
is?
think those are your little like temporary or like quick build things like, if you recall when JPA and like Fontaine and Robertson a number of years ago had those flex posts. That definitely came out of that account.
Okay,
That was the example everyone always gave us for it. I think that's the sort of thing there.
okay,
You got it.
Been
thanks.
still in a balance, but I think that is now spending it down.
Okay. All right, so that's my main comment on kind of the priorities and aligning the CIP with the comp plan.
Bill, you said it, yeah, we were talking outside, we've been talking with, Ben Chambers, our transportation planner, quite a bit about this, and he has been giving us, some early descriptions as we've been working through, then you were spot on, the quick build is what's coming from that category.
Well, you're making me follow the transportation planner, but I'm also gonna talk about transportation. I think what we found from the comp plan process and the zoning process is that a thing a lot of people are concerned about is the city's ability to build the infrastructure that's needed to make this denser city work. And our execution has not quite hit the mark over the last number of years. But we're really turning things around, and I think my big priority in the CIP is that we fully fund those efforts. So specifically, I mean, council had their long discussion about the sidewalk priority list and the budget associated with that, and sort of gave their assent to the budget associated with that, so I certainly expect to see that in there. But I would also like to make sure that all of our other pending transportation projects make it through. So I know, especially having seen this year's smart scale budget estimates, there have been budget increases in everything having to do with construction.
Everything.
We have all of these smart scale projects from earlier rounds that we haven't gotten over the finish line yet. We've already canceled all 4 phases of West Main and the Grady project to clean up or to get some of that money back to fund some of those budget overruns. But at this rate, it's looking like we may never get a smart scale award again. So I think it's pretty critical that we make sure that all of our smart scale projects get over the finish line. I mean, value engineering where necessary, maybe, but I don't want to see another round of cancellations of smart scale in order to pair the list and have barely enough money. I think we need to spend the money to top it off.
So I'll try to introduce a separate topic at the end of my piggyback here, I might fail, but to Lori's point, I think yes, but I guess this is yes and, or maybe it's yes, but say you're speaking of hitting the mark, I think it would be very helpful before we start laying down markers for future money and how we're gonna do this, that we get a human capital strategy update from the city on how we're gonna staff these, you know, do we have the supervisors, do we have the project managers, are we going to get them? I know that we've got, in certain areas, we have a pure body problem, and we ain't got them. And I think, because it would be malpractice in several aspects to assign money, either knowing we're not gonna have the personnel and the organizational capacity to do them in the time frame we're talking about, or that we don't know whether or not we have the capacity on the human capital side. So I think it would be helpful if, and maybe this gets shoved in James's direction to some sort of, what's our strategy? So if we're looking 3 years out, what is our throughput really gonna look like on these? Before we talk about
One of
throwing
the
money
things
at it.
that Sam is focused on is being absolutely certain that we've got the support infrastructure to spend all the money.
That is what
Because
I'm.
I have Parks and Rec, for example, we've got millions of bucks that have been approved, and we don't have the people to help us.
And on that side, even in terms of getting getting contracts to get things done, we've had this conversation about, well, we're actually spending more money than we would have, but we cobbled these nine smaller projects together, and we're paying a premium because we now have got a performing contractor who's willing and able to do it. So my concern about throwing money into these slots now is I'm leery of, if we can't land the plane, let's make sure we can land the plane before we launch it in the air, I guess.
The direction that he's given staff is don't bring anything you can't complete in the year. If you don't have the people and infrastructure you need to complete something in a fiscal year that you're asking for the money, don't bring it to
So next fiscal year or a fiscal
in
year?
a fiscal year.
So we want to
You
plan.
get budgeted, you got, whenever you said you're gonna spend it.
So, okay, but I guess I think that
Yes,
is
specifically.
distinct from, well, what about 3 years from now when we're supposed to start on X?
I mean, the budget iterates.
I understand.
So I think one thing we found though in the. The dark years where we weren't really accomplishing anything. Like all of the first 4, maybe 5 years of when I've sat in these exact discussions in this room. Except for that time that we stopped having the discussion because they were mad at us saying this, is that. Like, for example, they cut the sidewalk budget to effectively nothing. On the basis of we don't have the staff or the ability to produce these sidewalks. And with those projects, those are bondable dollars. We're not issuing the bonds until we need them. And so we could have been building up this reserve in that account of authorized but not issued bonds. And then now that we have a whole bunch of sidewalks and ability to projects and ability to actually execute on them. We wouldn't have to say, oh, well, all of a sudden, there's all this money that we need you to now allocate that you hadn't thought of before. Because you got all the money originally.
Yeah.
We could have had a couple $1 million in that account
Yeah,
to start
and
executing that.
I'm not making any pretense that we've got a pat solution for any of this. I mean, it's not, we don't. It just seems to me that I feel like we're flying. I feel like in some respects we're flying blind. Are we throwing money in this direction? It's all desirable to be done, and can we actually do this, or can't we actually do this? And a few years ago, we were also talking about, and this was in the affordable housing bucket, where there was an effort to try to place project by project affordable housing. And I made the argument that, look, 3 years from now, we do not know how we're gonna do this, what we're gonna be doing, and in what order. If we're gonna be assigning these large chunks of money, we need to put them in broader categories, and we'll clean it up later. I don't know if we have a pat solution for that too, but my concern is one of, in a CIP, I know it's an aspirational document, it's a planning document, but it's not an operations document. But I wonder what we can do to try to match our capacity to the rollout of these things in the timeline of a 5-year CIP. And I don't have a suggestion for how to do that. I'm just dumping it out there.
I think it's just a good reminder for staff to, they're bringing the budget forward to Ashley and Sam and James, that they make sure they can.
And also, if we have a better understanding of that, we might be in a position to say, we'd really like to do that, but we need to punt on all of that right now, because we know that in 18 months, we're not gonna be in any position to do whatever it is. I don't know. That's sort of my larger question.
It's a good reminder.
I'm not, and I don't think we have what we need to do is. So there's that. And then I really don't have a segue into another conversation. I'm just gonna leave the next person stuck to figure out to say something other than transportation dollars.
What am I supposed to do? Stop.
I just wanted to reiterate, I think Rory's point about the smart scale and trying to get a commitment to complete those, I think it's important. I think, there's been a fair amount of investment and sort of promise, and so I agree with that sentiment. I think it would be great, and particularly knowing this latest development, that getting future smart scale may be limited. I think seeing those through will have benefits, I think, for, driving economic sort of positivity, positive outcomes. I also thought in this, the ones worth considering, this idea of the homelessness and housing insecurity strategy. I'm not sure what that is, not a lot of clarity on that. So if there's any additional information on that. I think the pre-K center Walker, I've always been a little bit, again, this is me speaking as a Charlottesville resident, not as a UVA rep, but I've been confused how that got tabled when in 3 years, they're all gonna get pulled out of their school. So I just don't understand like how that's not happening. That's when I'm just kind of confused, because is the city gonna stop offering pre-K? I don't know if anyone knows that, because I was surprised with that they weren't all one capital thing, like doing Charlottesville Middle School and Walker groups.
They were separate, but
But
but I don't know why Walker got tabled or.
yeah, I'm just confused, because that facility is not, the plan they had was to demolish a gymnasium to build a pre-K center. They have to do the documentation, the permitting, the site prep, because like, I'm just worried there's not even enough time.
And then I
Yeah,
also
that'll-
heard, well, you probably heard this too, but I'm one of the parent.
Mhm.
Speaking of parent, something was saying, oh yeah, and we're gonna need trailers. At the
Learning
elementary
cottages.
school, because, oh my gosh, in a
Yeah,
year, the
because there's-
fifth graders
that's
are gonna
the-
be here. And I was like, didn't you know that?
Well, no, the whole plan is like, the fifth graders they're supposed to push down, so the
Right,
kindergarten is
right.
the pre-K.
But they were
and
saying,
that's
oh,
it.
but there was not space for the
Pre-K.
fifth graders, so we're gonna need. So
Yes.
I don't, like, it just sounded very
Well,
much like whatever the original idea was, went all to the Buford and everyone forgot this.
Yeah, well, it just was like politically, like, we'll just table it, but
Yeah,
it just
but
takes
it's
time
time.
to do the work, so that one, I just think it's interesting. I'm glad it showed up on here, at least for item consideration. Obviously, the climate action initiatives are important, but the one thing I wanted to throw out there that's not in this document was, Carl sent that Wolf Josie downtown mall, sort of tree plan, and I felt like.
That's a
That's-
CIP.
I think so. That's a,
Isn't that under the park?
Yeah,
Direct-
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, from the sound of it, it sounds big enough to be a capital expenditure.
Yeah. And so anyway, I thought that was a very well put together report. It feels very instantly actionable. It doesn't seem like, that it's something that we don't have the people in place to do. Like, it feels like it's something that with some smart investment, we could get up in front of that, because that was at the second last page when you see all the trees that are gonna come. I mean,
Yeah.
that could have unforeseen economic impacts that I think, like, it feels like the money you put in, you will get back by being good stewards of the downtown mall. So,
Yeah,
In 2004, we had that tree study that says we need to do something immediately, and then it's 2024, we haven't done anything, so. Let's not do that again and be here in 2044 with no trees downtown.
yes, again, I reiterate, we won't call them trailers. I think you're gonna lose trying to call them cottages and.
No, that's when they apply for them, so there are learning cottages are at some of the elementary
learning
schools.
cottages.
And I mean, it's our portable buildings that we all had school in at some point in time in our lives, but now they are learning cottages, and so we work with the dialogue as it is.
Learning, all right,
I would like to see some front porches on the cottage.
Exactly.
Rocking chairs.
Having taught in one of those for a couple of years, I would have difficulty calling it a cottage, but okay.
Well, I had to work myself to it as well, because I'm like, they're what?
Yeah, particularly.
No, that's not what they are. They're
Yeah,
like-
if you lay them out and if you have enough of them and you lay them out, you also lay out a plumbed portable / cottage that is closest to the building. So is that the cottage? Is that the potty cottage we're gonna call it now?
Potty cottage.
Right, but we've.
I thought you were gonna have the UVA is gonna chip in on those smart scale projects, right?
I think what they're doing is, I don't want to speak out of turn, I think that all the easements, there's no fees associated with any of the right of ways or the other things, so I think they waived any, so I think that is a way to chip in.
It's a good start.
Let's start.
I think there was early conversation about UVA managing the one on Ed. It was not deemed to be the direction that the city wanted to go, so I don't know.
Someone could turn one.
Yeah, so.
Speaking of human capital. Yeah.
What you got?
I guess I can need to start with the disclosure first, is that, I do, work for, or I consult for a firm that is doing a lot of PHA projects, so I'm not gonna touch affordable housing. I don't really have anything to add, everyone's taken everything I want to talk about. I'm just gonna keep this meeting moving. Reiterate them all for sure, I'm sure that's planned for in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at my phone at the packet. I didn't bring my computer. I mean, I remember, I looked over it all and it all seemed well thought out for what we have. So I guess my question is when it gets down to it, if we want to push for the downtown, what can we take from? Like, to me, it was like, okay, this is all,
I felt like the downtown mall was easily chunkable, like you
Yeah.
could do it over the course of 5 years, like you could say, we're gonna do Central Place. And we're gonna
Oh,
do
yeah,
the
yeah,
improvements, and they could do that, and it could just be. I even thought that they should take the proceeds from the corral rentals and help sort of just direct them. Just in the near term for 5 years, put them 100%, like, first of all, maybe reevaluate the layout of the corrals, maybe up the rental rate, because it's kind of has.
Oh, the cafes?
The cafes.
Okay.
Those are already considered, well, they're a revenue item in the CIP.
They are, so like
under-
I said, it's still going here and
And
then.
then they go to mall
Yeah,
maintenance, which I assume we spend it on maintenance, but
Yeah.
maybe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought, just like we had the sidewalk site, like if there was like a
Right.
set amount that they got and they had the oversight to say, okay, we can replace 15 trees this year, or 10 trees this year.
Yeah.
And do the associate work, and then they could just have it mapped out for 5 years. I mean, that seems logical to me, because it doesn't seem like the tree replacement lends itself to doing them all at once. It seems like they're just buying these groves, so. Those stands,
I agree.
The whole bunch is not to do it all at once, right?
yeah.
I actually do have a question. Are we done paying for the middle school other than debt service at this point? Okay, so that was, okay, I saw the zeros, I somehow thought that was going on more.
Yeah, no, they have enough funding to actually cover that.
And we got 20 million back from the state.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know
And I think they did the full scope too, right? They got the auditorium. and-
that. Yeah.
Wow. How do I
It
not
looks
know
nice.
this stuff?
Gotta read Sean's newsletter.
Well, you put one out every day.
I'll read it. There's a podcast.
Yeah.
I was just gonna reinforce, I don't know what's going on with the homelessness discussion, but if there's, again, I guess I feel like I can't really say like, oh, this should have more money or this should have, because I don't know where
Yeah,
it would be like
It's just a bullet point here. It's not even clear what it is.
It is.
taken from, but I would say that goes in the council priorities of additional.
It is
resources.
just a bullet point for this point,
Yeah.
but it is a top priority for the city manager. He's working pretty hard.
And we're
Structural.
we're leaning forward on Premier Circle, which is going to still require yet another infusion from the city and probably another infusion from the city. We're up to, and we mean the project itself is, I don't know, 40 million or something. It's somehow, yeah, but,
Was that natural?
The red carpeted.
the red carpeting being
On
redone.
29.
Yeah, it's I mean, the county stepped up. I mean, it's a it's a joint Army Navy effort. But
It's partially permanent supported housing and then a later phase will be PHA, regular affordable housing permits.
yeah, but I think that you're right on the homeless strategy. That sort of you stumble backward into affordable housing too on that. Which again. Yeah, when things start getting complicated fast.
Well, and I've just, in reading articles, whether it's support for him and the city to figure out what they're doing, not even building anything yet, but just like, it seems like there's been a lot of spinning around what the next steps are.
Mhm.
I would see like a triage step.
I see.
Just to kind of like have
Yeah,
something demonstrable in the short term that may then help work towards a longer
Yeah.
term situation.
Heard an interesting thing at Board of Supervisors last week, which is that the Salvation Army and Patcham are working together to establish a low barrier shelter
barrier.
by winter 2025.
Okay.
So is that,
cool.
is that 2 months? Is that a year and 2 months? I'm not
So
sure.
What's that you say they're doing and what's the relationship?
I
Who's
don't
doing
know any
what?
details beyond that.
You just,
So
one second.
you don't know if it's related to SUP that Salvation Army has?
I don't, but that was a thought that I had, that maybe, but I don't know. Traditionally, for Salvation Army shelters are
They're
not
high, yeah, they're high.
low barrier.
Yeah, we haven't had any activity on, that SUP. From a plan review standpoint.
I think I also heard them say that they were still in fundraising and they
Fundraising,
needed
that's
to
what I
get
heard
some
as well.
phase of that, some amount funded for their national organization to fill in the rest of the loan or something. But
So the only thing that I had, and you already got it, was, making certain that we've got the infrastructure to support the comp plan that we're putting in place. The other thought that I had as well, though, is as we go forward, do we need to make sure that the fire department is thinking about the apparatuses that allow us to support, buildings. They've got a lot of money for at least one apparatus, but we may want to ask them to check to be certain that's gonna be enough to support us going, or the end of the ball, or wherever we may be going up.
It's a good comment, because they've also changed, yeah, there's a whole geometry associated, having had conversations, as the building gets taller, you have to set the equipment further back in order to be at the right angle, and then there's the outriggers have to pin it down, so it's a good comment about the equipment, if we suddenly are having a shift in the number of high mid-rise buildings, you know, that's a good comment. Because I don't know if they have an abundance of tall ladders.
Isn't there a point where it just doesn't,
Makes sense.
well, it doesn't, you just
Or-
rely on sprinklers?
Yeah.
They still.
isn't that what a high rise is, that you shelter in place
Yeah.
basically?
Well, or you have longer to get out.
Because I'm just thinking, when we were done the MNIV corridor, there's projects that are not as tall as what's in the comp plan, and they were very much key for ladder access.
That's true.
Probably not having trees too.
Hmm.
All of that, actually, that is a question, so with taller buildings and,
Or is it a spreadsheet?
do we have the water infrastructure for sprinklers?
Yeah, that does.
Listening,
Or is it a spreadsheet?
or note takers.
So, well,
Well, I mean, we do, because if it gets hot, if we find that they don't, they end up with water towers throughout the building.
they also charge hookup fees.
Yeah.
and would just charge.
And I'm just
their-
wondering, like, on the streets, do they have a building? There's always a water pressure concern every time you put in a building.
So as we deliberate, the last 5 years, as we deliberated and made a recommendation, the recommendations have not been detailed to the point of recommending dollar amounts. We have, and correct me or redirect me or guide me, you've done this for. We're using that, but typically we don't try to micromanage the actual number, we just try to help the council understand what our priorities are. If we want to add something, we then usually recommend that we take something out so we can make sure that we end up with a balanced budget. So as you begin thinking about this, and you begin thinking about wanting to add something, what are you willing to give up as we add something?
But yes, this, as Hosea noted, this isn't an exercise where we would take a spreadsheet and say, oh, we're gonna take 2,000 from this one and put it to this one, and then we're gonna take and add here. It's definitely a higher level, more here, less here, some here, that kind of thing, and then the budget office kind of puts together different scenarios that can address those priorities for consideration.
So just as a process matter, do we have? And I'm sure the answer to this is yes, and I just haven't walked face first into it. Do we have an elegant way of outcome measurement on the CIP?
There are, so attached to the CIP, there are, measurements that are part of that, and so if, you get into kind of the weeds of the budget, work page there, it will note different outcomes that come through that, but,
But that, so hence not elegant.
yeah, it's not, it'll note how many of this, or, how many square footage of this, or how many linear feet of this.
Yeah,
So,
so what I'm kind of interested in is money assigned, money spent. time frame did we meet it? Where were we, where did we stub our toe? Where did we fall flat on our face? Where did we actually sprint? You know, I mean, to sort of get a handle on the measurable of what we're doing or what we did, I'd be really interested to see.
Are you familiar with the Budget Explorer?
Yeah, but I'm looking for something that's more of a,
What do we get?
Assessment.
What do we get for the?
yeah, a presentable or a presentationable, okay, we look at this category, well, this is what we got done. If there's a way to sort of get at that. And I guess the answer to that is, well, not elegant. Right. What an
Well, I
intern-
mean-
what an intern
I
project.
will have a chance to meet with the finance director and have a conversation.
What an intern project that.
You know. Only do it, yeah. But what else? Okay. Please.
I'm sorry, that was me. I think one quick thing I'd add to this in the past, but, and, Phil kind of touched on it actually, but one of the things in our affordable housing plan, was this idea that we would have, sort of oversight, committee oversight, not us, the PC, but in general, the city, and, a competitive process for our affordable housing fund awards. And we established the CAF committee, to govern the CAF. But we have made this move of effectively not putting, we put a relatively small amount, less than 10% of our affordable housing commitment each year into the CAF. And then we give much larger commitments to individual projects on an ad hoc basis. Basically, if they got their SUP approved, we fund them.
Or if they ask for it and.
Yeah, so.
So it would be nice to say, we're gonna, I mean, I don't know that there are other pending projects right now that we haven't already effectively committed to by, I mean, by putting them in the CIP, I think there are several that we haven't sent official letters to. Actually, I don't know if that's even true anymore, but one Cherry did not get LIHTC this year, so there's still that one round. It would be nice to say, this 10 million commitment we're making, that goes into the CAF. We want to make large commitments. That has some sort of, could be a different process of the CAF committee to oversee that than for the annual HOPS commitments, but
So are you,
But
or,
not fully ad hoc.
so I just want to clarify, the commitment provided by the city was to provide 10 million per year for affordable housing efforts. Are you saying 10 million here and then anything else is cake? I'm not
I
sure what
think,
you're saying.
I think for future planning for like out years, be nice to just say 10 million in a bucket. And then have some process to go from that to 3 million is going to the Park Street Church project. And 2 million is going to the MACA project.
Yeah.
Rather than, well, they asked for 2 million and we approved their SUPs, so I guess we are giving them the 2 million. Without even so much as a pro forma of what are your economics in this project, how does it compare to other potential projects that could be done?
So what you're arguing for, I'm sorry, what you're suggesting, is someone who sits on both the CDBG and CAF and the HAP and here. That, and I've sort of commented on this as well. This is it probably does belong somewhere in the Office of Community Solutions, is that if we're spending this kind of money on affordable housing, some of it is CIP and some of it is straight out budget. Do we have one organizational review process to figure out, are we prioritizing the right order? Do we have, or, is this the best bang we can possibly get for our bucks on all of these things as they unfold?
Right.
The concern that I have, speaking as somebody who is absolutely wants something like that, I think we gotta really be smart about how we structure that and how it works and who sits on that, because some of that is gonna get into the weeds of numbers in a way that is somewhat sophisticated, I think. And I'm not saying the cap isn't the right place for it, I'm just saying that we gotta set up a system that works for that. And fortunately, we do have a very, very, very experienced, retired senior budget official who sits on the cap. So he actually ran the intelligence budget for the United States for the last few years of his career, so he understands these things and the processes, but I think that that would be a very, it's a no-brainer, but it's also ambitious at the same time. So we'd say 10 million is these are cap funds for affordable housing, it's in affordable housing fund. Now let's talk about distribution instead of, instead of the planning commission and the city council sort of cobble together what they think is gonna happen. Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure if that's part of the CIP planning process, but yeah, no kidding.
I was
Sorry.
gonna add, this is probably a whole different, this is like a whole different discussion
Yeah.
and meeting, but, yeah. And I guess one of the thing I was thinking of is there a difference, well, we're serving different income levels with all these projects and different populations. But, also, there's the long-term stuff. And I'm only, because I've helped on the public housing stuff. There's like West Haven is gonna be done in probably 3 phases or, so that stuff you have to know when you go in. We have 5 million 5 years from now, whatever. Versus like the Park Street, like smaller projects. So maybe there's like a distinction between the Friendship Court or the West Haven, like huge.
Yeah.
So I think that is the
Redevelopment
distinction
thing?
that was made is like,
And
we have these more near-term projects and they're gonna go through this competitive process.
Yeah,
The others, we need to know further out, and now there's like an RFP that goes out to say, or an RFI of like, tell us about these things you have coming. But then at some point in the middle there, some decision is made and then it pops out as the CIP has X amount for it. I think you're right, it probably does have to be done more future looking, like years in the future
Yeah.
for that reason.
depending on
Well,
there's
I think
only a
that's
couple
decision.
properties
Yeah.
that are gonna be that.
But
big
that's a
in town.
decision that, again, this body that what this process could say, all right, this is a forward commitment that's gonna be 3 or 4 years. Let's consult on that and say, if we're gonna do this as a 3 or 4 year commitment, here's what we're looking at. you know,
Yeah, at least they're tracking that
that-
with
yeah.
all the other,
Yeah, I mean, I
smaller-
think a lot of this, what I've been saying, what you're saying. I think is, I feel like I need to get my teeth into the process and measurable outcomes on a lot of this stuff in a way that we're not. Now, supposedly, we're supposed to, the reporting on that affordable housing is gonna be much more robust, as a result of, affordable housing plan, comprehensive plan, blah, 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 it's gonna get more robust, and we've got the staffing to get something that's much more robust, but we'll see. Yeah, all right, but not really a CIP discussion.
So the question that you guys had about Kate, pre-K. Loud is the representative to the school board for CIP stuff, so we want to drop a buggy this year, sure.
Did he break down and actually start watching?
No, I don't believe so. He noted that,
So,
yeah, he noted this morning that he was,
A bruised turd and was not, yes, gotcha.
he said nothing like that, no.
ask you to repeat it.
Was not feeling well and was not able to be virtual, so I imagine that he feels pretty awful if he
Yes.
can't.
So what else would you like from us on this?
I think I'll be able to take some information from that and put that into some bullets and we can have that information moving forward, so,
We're ready to talk about ordinance revisions.
sure.
Why don't we start with you again? And if you got nothing, say you got nothing.
I basically have nothing, I guess I am curious to see. I'm curious to see how things are going, like what's are things being permitted, is what we hoped we would see actually materializing, yeah, so, but I've got nothing else, so I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a
You
lot.
wanna give Ms. Creasy maybe a chance to.
Oh, sure, sorry.
How are things? I mean, are we seeing more applications or?
So we just, Hosea just signed off on the first sublot
Oh,
situation, so
exciting.
that's exciting. We have had at least 40 formal pre-application meetings. And those we have every Wednesday morning, we have a series of 3 slots, and we've regularly filled them up. We've had lots of less formal, those are on the schedule kinds of things, that doesn't count, you know, a one-off conversation or somebody stopping in, so we've had quite a few of those as well. We have had a lot of people trying to find creative ways to make things work. The zoning aspects, once you know, zoning limitations was one barrier to progress. And for the most part, once people heard I can't have more than X number of units, then most of the time they had moved on. Well, now we have taken that barrier away. And so now they have to work through harder things. And some of those include infrastructure related, having proper water sewer access, maybe sizing. It just kind of depends on where what the situation is. Fire access, making sure there's enough support for that, fire hydrants, access. So there are a number of considerations on that end where someone will bring in kind of a small obscure lot and wanna put a whole bunch of things on it. And then the realities of what it would take from an infrastructure standpoint have caused a little bit of hesitation on a few, but a number of them have also worked through those, and we're slowly getting applications formally being turned in. So it's very incremental. This is exactly what we predicted. There was a lot of angst in the community that we were gonna be overrun with, you know, with chaos. But it's kind of worked out generally as we predicted, that people are figuring things out. The sublot concept, again, that was one where we were assured that that was something happening in a lot of places. It is not. And so we had to build a relationship with the surveyors in the community to talk through the concept, to get from them what they felt like they could do professionally and work through kind of the logistics of what could go on a plat to memorialize that. And we'll still be working through bits and parts over time on that, but yeah, I mean, we've made some progress. You know, people are looking at development in different ways. I'll note a permit that came across that I saw today was for an existing structure, and it's in an area where before they just would have the 1 unit, and they're considering an internal change in order to have 2 units within an existing structure. So something that we, you know, are hopeful to see is, you know, preservation of structures and then additional structures. We've seen a few really cute kind of 6 development unit type situations. Yeah, still a work in progress, but I can't give you like we've had, you know, all this many come forward. I mean, the first one's been signed off on. So we know we'll have some built from the sublot situation. We have a number of development plans that are under review.
So while you're talking,
Sure.
Have you and staff, have you started to see, hey, this is a pain point for understanding, or this is a pain point for clarity, or oops, that we can't get here from there because of the way we wrote this ordinance? I mean, are there things that you're starting to put bullet points on this, or, you know, like this paragraph actually is a word salad when you try to implement it, we need to redo it, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, I will not be tainting your conversation here today, but I will note. That some of the issues that came up towards the end of our code review process. As we were moving towards the finish line from the draft. Some of the changes and things that were made have become hurdles. And we kind of predicted they would, and you know, we'll see what the appetite is for revisiting now that we have some examples of that. And so again, I will not detail that because I want you guys to be able to share what you have. We've been keeping an annotated version of our new code with things that, you know, that needs another set of eyes. And then eventually we're gonna have to work that into, okay, these are nice little edit things. They shouldn't be terribly controversial. To all the way to, okay, are we really gonna revisit this item that was a passion point for the community?
Yeah, geez, I feel like Carl's gonna have all the things and the rest of us are like, I don't know. But I mean, I think just from, I mean, I've been obviously following the permit portal, which is much nicer than the old one, though.
We're learning and growing all at the same time.
We can fix the maximum attachment size thing so I can see the site plans, but.
We're, again, there's I'm not sure that you're aware, but there is an effort to work towards an interactive map. That the goal is to feed those plans into that, so you'll be able to click in.
Oh, yeah.
So it's in progress.
Okay,
So yes, we realize that is a concern because the point of this was to be able to allow folks to find what they needed themselves, so.
cool. I mean, one thing I've noticed just from like. The special exception or two that's been filed is the build to seems to have been something of a problem where there's an existing building. If it's not in that build to setback zone, then you can do a rear attachment to the building. Can't have a rear detached building, otherwise you have to build in front, and most people don't want to build in front of their existing house. Especially if all they're trying to do is add an extra thing there. So maybe we need to take another look at how the non-conforming for build to allowances work. That is the main, like, actual, well, zoning thing, I guess, that comes to mind. The other thing that certainly concerns me is that I've only seen one application come in an X zone. I think it was, in this case, RX5, but none of the other non-RA or BRC zones have gotten anything. And that one thing that came in was 9 units, you know, so one under the inclusionary zoning limit.
So I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about the timing of that. So we have a lot of legacy projects. We are deep in site plan finalization, probably next year, working into construction for some of the big ones that you guys dealt with at the end of last year.
Right,
And when we passed the new ordinance in 03, it took a good 10 years before we started to actually see parts and pieces be implemented in large numbers.
yeah,
Because, you know, it's really, until you got the words on the paper, people aren't putting a whole lot
yeah.
into that.
I hear that. I'm definitely not in like freak out mode about it yet, but I am starting to get a little concerned, and certainly they're larger projects, they probably take longer to plan and submit. But when you see things like the Martha Jefferson Hospital building, well, the one on the empty parking lot behind the CFA Institute, where they, I assume, lobbied hard for council to change that cutoff date. And the new ordinance lets them build twice as tall. But they don't want to presumably largely because of that inclusionary zoning requirement. Which the purpose, of course, of inclusionary zoning was to get affordable units, but I think there was some talk and some hope that we would. Help kind of defray that cost, so it's not just a tax on, the new renters with. The hack was supposed to review a tax abatement strategy that it seems like hasn't really. Come to fruition, or I don't know what the status of that is. I know it's sort of out of the planning commission's purview. I guess, but maybe it should be in the planning commission's purview. Especially
Tax
if the hack
abatement?
doesn't have the capacity to do it.
We put out a good amount of work product on that. It went into, it went into the ether, and, we are circling back to that in a more determined way, and there is more of an interest at OCS.
Well, and there's definitely work being done with tax abatement ideas with both economic development
Right.
and OCS, so they're, they're
They're working on it,
for consideration
yeah,
there.
yeah, and that is actually a hack future conversation for, when is that on the board for December, January?
My calendar with me.
Right, so. I
Yeah,
hope
but
Secretary of the Hack is present and does not have the calendar for the organization. Yeah, you're not gonna be there either.
All takes clock's ticking, it's been almost a year. I
mean,
get it,
yeah, I know, I mean, it's, we have this document and it's here and it's really pretty much following a similar path that we expected. It would have, with so much legacy still occurring, there's a lot that the development community has to see how that pans out in order to determine whether, what their next step is. There's also economic, all those things that come into play. So, we are still going at 150 miles an hour. So, it may not be large, huge things that are not legacy, but.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not alarm bells blaring,
Right.
it's, maybe let's keep an eye on that.
Well, we have definitely provided for a lot of flexibility through this code. It's, the flexibility is there. And when the stars align, there's a lot of opportunity for folks to do a lot of different things.
Yep. Last small thing I'll say is. I know I vaguely remember we had a whole argument about this, the whole front yard fence thing, but. Last week or 2 weeks ago, drove in that, do we really need that to be a law? A canopy fence in your front yard?
It's only in certain areas.
We're not
Is
gonna
that true?
talk fences today.
Okay.
Oh.
What are you talking about?
I don't even totally remember what the fence conversation ended up
It's
in.
because Market Street is a downtown street.
Okay, but we had a whole conversation about banning them in RA, did we not include that in the end?
We did not.
Okay, never mind.
I think there's a height limit.
I don't care about fences that much.
There's a height limit to it, I
The
reject
one
it.
thing that is nice about the flexibility of the code is the fact that, some of these things that we scratch our head at least have, a release valve.
Yeah.
Such as, the West Main, and there'll be one or two others where you might just do a little bit of, okay, but you know what, we're working with, something pretty new, and we're gonna find that as we go.
Yeah, I think that is totally true, it's, a lot of it, I think, in terms of what we're thinking about revising should be. Let's look at what special exceptions have been submitted, if they are totally like, of course that should be allowed. Like, it seems
Can we
like some of the
figure out a
build
way
to
to write it?
stuff,
Yeah, can we figure out
let's
a way
fix
to
it,
write it?
yeah, but. That's all I have for thoughts.
So, I am interested in the pain points as sort of the way to, but, if y'all are gonna hold close to the vest on that for now. But I'd be interested in seeing that at some point. I've been promised a couple of diatribes and screeds related to the ADU manual. I haven't received them yet, but, I think there is maneuvering to be done in there, but I'm also not sure I've got the data to start talking about that yet. the, to Rory's point on X and, what we see where and things are getting built, I think that there is a good amount of constriction in financing right now on a lot of things. Where the money where banks just are not stepping forward, that their asset buckets are full and they spent a ton of money on residential apartment building construction, these larger banks and filling up their buckets and they can't do it anymore. But I'd be interested to see if there are any complaints on the developer side. I can't finance that building because of the way we struck, because of, it's a mixed use and I don't have mixed use financing options and I'm trying to build a mixed use building there, but no one wants to, I can't get the bank loan for it.
We haven't been presented necessarily with those arguments.
Well, of course, they're not gonna.
Water, the mixed use thing.
No, but if someone were to say, I'd really like to build a mixed use building here, but I'm not building a mixed use building here. But again, that's the sort of thing that you're not gonna hear about, I mean, no
Well,
one's
we
gonna show
have
up and
in the
say.
past, I mean, with the old code,
Yeah,
we definitely got that, this is not, what you have here in this document is not something that we can get financed. We
Yeah.
have not, whether
This
it's,
is sort of the
whether it's
opposite,
because
right?
it hasn't been shared
Yeah.
or whether, that's not a factor. I
Or
don't have an
we're more
answer.
flexible, so they say, well, I can't finance it X way, but I can still do Y and Z with this lot, so I want to do it. So but I'd be interested to see if there's a pain point there, but I want to take a closer look at the ADU, but we're sort of obligated to take the annual review of that. And I've had at least one developer has promised me some comments in detail, so I have not yet gotten them.
I had some comments on that last year, and I think I sent them to you, right, that I don't think were addressed pretty much at all.
Some of them got it, well, a lot of, that was right after we addressed a bunch of stuff, you said, oh, by the way, and I said, these 6 things got dealt with, those things got ignored. Yeah, you're right, but I don't even remember what that was, don't ask me what we were deciding the last 60 days of that, I mean. Day to day.
This is might be a really stupid question, so I apologize if it is. Why do we even have ADUs anymore if you can build?
No.
Affordable dwelling unit.
Oh,
Really,
thank you.
Really.
Yeah.
So the reason we're stuck with this is that,
Gotcha, okay.
the
Thank
state
you.
legislature has defined ADU as, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're actually, our zoning guys are trying to transition us to additional units. Saying additional unit.
Yeah.
No, not that, additional unit, so that we can try and minimize,
No D.
no
Stop it.
acronym. No acronym.
Who's showing you?
Trying to transition and trying to, minimize the confusion there. I don't know if we'll make it, but, that
Problem
is.
is everyone's so attached to ADU as meaning.
Sorry,
except
yeah, I just
the
didn't know,
additional unit.
accessory versus.
We just get rid of ADU as affordable unit, which no one thinks about. I get the state code says that, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's other
That's what kills
times
us.
where
All of
we
that.
Okay.
So we're stuck.
reference the state code
I
and
was
say
getting
we're gonna talk,
confused.
we're gonna
That-
use different names for it.
Yeah.
Like state code says special exception, and we call it special use permit, we're used to, or maybe vice
Well,
versa.
so we're
or
trying
something like that.
as part of, in reference to the code, instead of that to go with, and you're allowed the additional units. To distinguish between how much the value and who's in it kind of thing, as opposed to, cause yes,
Yeah.
that is very confusing.
I just think we need to do the same thing with the afford, it's like just call it affordable units. Right, we could do that, that's allowed, probably by state code. And then if we just stop using the ADU acronym altogether, then there finally won't be any
I'm
confusion.
sure
maybe.
eventually something will come to pass.
Called an AFU, AFU, no, that's no, that's got all sorts of potential to go sideways. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is kind of a more abstract concept, but we have sort of all the comp plan and we have the new zoning classifications for the entirety of Charlottesville. And I think what we're starting to get glimpses of is sort of densification happening in kind of more periphery type of locations. And I was just curious, knowing that these developments that are getting tucked into what maybe for single family sort of zoned areas, and if the densification is good, it may help us with just overall sort of the macro level bed count. It will drive a car dependency and it'll make it harder to tie into bus lines and bicycle lines. And I was just curious if there was sort of a desire to sort of try to prioritize within this comp plan, like highlight areas of where concentrated development would actually benefit the quality of life and benefit sort of, it wouldn't add economic burden to the maintenance of our roads or the maintenance of our.
You know, it'd be really helpful if we had, in these residential areas, we had commercial uses so that you could reduce the number of people, number
Yeah.
of need for a car.
I'm just saying, like, we have SWATs and we identified in our,
Really good idea.
in the, I was just curious if there was a mechanism to help incentivize concentration development in our urban core. And sort of, it doesn't disregard the comp, it's instead, it sort of says, hey, in the next 20 years, this is the place that would be ideal to have density. And that instead of just letting the market decide where density comes, because I find a lot of this is they're taking the low hanging fruit that may be cheaper to develop, but they may actually put more cost burden long-term on the city to sit there and put more traffic or having to buy cameras that sort of mitigate traffic and stuff and software. I mean, I just feel like if there's a way to sort of develop our primary corridors first as a priority, I just don't know if there's a way to help like dangle carrots to the development community.
I think the way is, I guess if you do it like tax abatements, but the way is probably like if you allow more in those places, right? Which like, if you would put more RV and RC in the cores
Yeah.
or higher X things on the forward corridors or whatever, but
There was,
in some places we did that, in some places we did that and rolled it back, and then in some places we did the opposite of that.
Yeah, and well, and then some of it is the reality of ownership of properties, you know, there's certain areas where they're under single ownership and there's no interest in doing anything right now. Or the lots are wonky and you've got to assemble quite a few to get somewhere and you've got ownership and other sorts of, you know, so there's a lot of things that are outside of our control.
Yeah, it's curious if there was a little, like, what is the little incentive to maybe what seems like that's too much work to being like, you know what, this is worth doing. I was just curious if there was something feedback from the development community. To be like, hey, instead of. doing
Let me
this-
do anything I want.
Yeah.
That is the feedback.
yeah,
We did actually have the infill SUP where we drew sort of a ring that was basically half the city but the center. And said you can
That-
get an
Yeah, we
SUP
found
for a
that
little more
wasn't
density
a
there.
very successful tool.
That's good.
Yeah, but, yeah, no, it's a really good point, Michael. Yeah,
Are there gonna be, I forget what meeting, I was, where I heard this, but more small area plans being done, right? So maybe that's part of,
Yeah, I was thinking that. 'cause
it
we
could
were
be a
talking
part of
about
that
mix.
discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to highlight other.
Like
opportunistic
within
areas.
neighborhoods, maybe that could be like a topic
Mhm.
that could come out.
James did promise that rest.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's still on the books.
yes, yeah, that's, I think, a great opportunity there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, I mean, that is still the intention to be, focusing more on small area plans. I think we're looking forward to, you know, getting to a place with our staff capacity where we can make that happen. And I think it'll be interesting actually how the small area plans could point to, you know, additional changes we might want to make to more tailored, you know, zoning provisions in these areas. You know, we'll just have to kind of see how that plays out over time, you know, what the community interest is in those smaller areas for additional development that might make, you know, that map look a little bit different in the future.
Yeah.
But, I did just want to say that I think while, you know, allowing for greater housing choices throughout the city, you know, doesn't necessarily mean that there's like one area where we're really interested more so in having that greater opportunity. I do think there's something to be said for just allowing for more, you know, ridership of our transit, our existing transit. So I mean, I think there's more investment that could be made in our existing transit network so that you're not necessarily assuming that, you know, all those people are gonna be in cars, you know, and it's, I just think that there's other ways we can think about that. rather than just automatically assuming we should be focusing all of the density on the corridors itself.
And, part of the reasoning for the core neighborhood and the, sensitive areas zone that we put in, that we weren't really happy with that characteristic, with those criteria anyway, but we sort of thought to ourselves that that was a holding, that was a marker for small area plans where we can develop more thoroughly and more precisely and how we're gonna zone for those areas in the future. So it's on the one hand that the problem is that if you go like lightning, a small area plan takes 2 years. I mean, you can't do it. Can you theoretically do it in 18? Yeah, it's gonna take you at least 2 years to do one, and we need to do 5 of them, in rapid succession. So we're 10 years out before we've got sort of an organized plan. So that may not be the way to approach this.
I think,
Well, again, remember, you guys, part of this is, it's very, it's incredibly open compared to what we used to have.
Mhm.
I mean, there are so much more flexibility and options that people have, where they don't even have to get into, a detailed process, if they choose. So, again, while these other processes are working themselves out, which is gonna take a little time, we have, allowed for some flexibility in the interim.
I think if there's a piece of data I'd love to see beyond. Like what has been submitted and where, that like wasn't allowed before, right? Like the. People implementing our BRC and whatever, it's. How many like renovations and flips are there still within those sensitive areas that probably would have been allowed before? That, I mean, that was the thing that we were aiming, or that's a thing that we were aiming to. Tamp down on, right, of houses being bought for 300,000 and flipping for 600 or more. My impression is that it's continuing apace, but
It's, yeah, I mean, I don't think we've seen a huge change in the types of permits that are coming, that normal building permit kinds of things.
Yeah.
A lot of additions, decks. A lot of people shoring up their foundations. I found that that there are a lot of people working through that
That
process.
rainstorm we had last fall, or whenever that was. Everyone in 10th and Page, every basement flooded.
oh yeah.
Maybe not every, but I mean, everyone I talked to.
I guess the people whose basements didn't flood didn't feel comfortable standing out in the street and crowing about it. They just kept their mouths shut.
So Carl, what do you got?
Well, first I have a question. The sublot thing, do you guys notice, are people forming that like a condominium when they make when they do sublots? Or has it been done in a different process?
So. I don't know that we have a really good answer yet, because we just got the first one signed out. Yeah, they would not necessarily have to do a traditional condo, but they would have to have agreements in place for the common areas.
Okay.
So, there will be documentation that they're gonna have to have in place on the private side to manage that.
Voice. So much.
Do they necessarily have common areas?
Well, they're gonna have access easements,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and not always.
yeah, not the ones that are along the block, split along
Yeah.
the frontage, I guess, like that one on. 16th or Northeast or whatever, by Firefly.
Yeah,
Never mind.
I know which one you're talking.
I know which one you mean.
And there are things that we have, but. we have that done now, right? So we created kind of a, what do we call that? It's on the tip of my tongue, kind of a,
Thank you.
yes, for, things that. To think about as you're doing that, and we're trying to encourage developers as they as they do that, to think through 10 steps down the line, so that the last man who buys a site actually can do something with it. And so, again, we're all learning and growing in this process. We had hoped there was more out there, and we're on the cutting edge as always.
And the reason I was asking is, I mean, if it is. Exactly how this works, because my firm is too small to have insurance, but architecture with professional insurance. You have to get special insurance if you do condominium. And I don't know if that would end up applying to this or not. If it doesn't apply, that would be a really good thing.
It shouldn't, I mean, the concept was go fee simple, to get away from condominium. It's just that there are some, for what the chair just signed was very simple. It was a lot that has frontage on 6.5 streets, so creating sublots was done for a shared wall issue, so they still have access. They don't have to do common area. As you get into the more some of the larger where you're going to have common areas, maybe you're going to do a courtyard style where you're going to have landlocked parcels, but they share maybe a courtyard, so you're going to need some sort of documentation for the easements. Also, there's going to be a stormwater component, so you might not be going the condo route, but you're going to be going probably an HOA
Okay,
route.
okay.
In
That's,
condo world, if you're doing detached, if you're doing a small condo development, there's a vast advantage to doing it as attached as opposed to detached individually buildings for financing purposes. So is there, you said there's an insurance rider you gotta get so that
Yeah.
Carl, to protect, for Carl's liability for building a condo building, for designing a condo building. Is there a size to that, or if it's?
so where this is coming from is, one of the architects I consult for, saw a lot in Tiffin Page, and, one of the ideas was, oh, what if we did, found a way to get Habitat interested in it, and they put 6 townhouses on it, and, then it was, well, wait a second, if that's a condo, I can't do that because my insurance doesn't allow it, so I don't know more than that, I haven't
gotcha.
created this insurance personally, so I don't know,
Gotcha.
but, I think that is a concern.
Is that because it's a multifamily instead of
I don't know the definition.
single house?
I think because
Concern?
I think his concern was that it's because it's got a, well, so I know for a traditional condo, high rise or whatever,
Yeah.
you've got your shared building components and all that. And I think part of the concern was we have shared driveways and whatever else. But I don't, again, this is me not knowing entirely, except that just curious if that.
We
word
haven't
came up,
heard
but it sounds like not.
that concern
Okay.
from anybody at this point. I'm not, yeah, I wouldn't even be able to speculate as to what but insurance is weird.
Yeah. So I was trying to keep my comments high level. I know I keep promising a list to James, and I guess not to you. And it's, my brain has gone to mush, unfortunately, but I was also hoping to hear what some of the community feedback was. But some of the big issue items, stuff that modifications to buildings that don't require a permit review, but would actually impact zoning. For example, thinking of some things that we've seen on the BAR. Just wondering how that gets handled. People changing their transparency of their facades, or getting rid of opening, like doorways, things like that, that may not actually constitute something that has to go to the building permit, but would be a change to their elevation, and how does that get caught? How does that get processed? How does the city review it? I think also I guess fences and trees. I mean, that's been another thing. I've had some neighbors ask me when, a tree comes down, they're, well, is this allowed? Well, or at first they start by just complaining, saying, oh my God, my neighbor knocked down a tree. It's going to cause erosion on my property. And so, I would tell them, well, that's not really, they have to get a permit for that. And I did send an email to I forget if it was correct or read, I can never remember which one was pitched, unfortunately, about the, I just asked him if he got a tree permit, didn't get a response back on that, but that is a question, is how is that enforced? Is it, we have a mechanism for making sure that, you know, it seems to be based on a tattletale type system, and is that, yeah, how does that end up working? Is it working? You know, again, like if someone builds a big fence in their front yard, I guess that's pretty easy. Take a picture of it. This is bigger than allowed, but also comes back to the fact that I don't know that the public, did we ever do a public education component to this? Do residents actually know what is and is not allowed? I mean, I know the development community is well aware of this, but just, you know, random person that, you know, lives in one of our neighborhoods, do they know? Looking at some properties around town for potential development, some of the things that have been confusing me are height. I feel like there needs to be some clarifying statement that, and I hope I understand this correctly, that height in stories is measured from the street, but height in feet is measured from a grade plane. And it doesn't seem like that's clear. And maybe I'm making that up because maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that was my understanding of how it works. Parking seems to be a big issue, trying to either fit it on the site or fit it inside a building with active depth requirements. And I don't think we need to get rid of active depth requirements. I think they're really important, but it's we may need to look at how deep they are and look at some. I'm sure we're probably getting examples from developers, you know, where the stumbling blocks are in providing parking within a building with enough space for it to have an active exterior. And does it need to be on all sides or all frontages? That seems to keep being a stumbling block for the projects that looked at. Yeah, that's my kind of big, I mean, I've got some other little nitpicky little things I've been finding, but again, I should just compile this for you guys. More so than all. One random idea that doesn't really fit with zoning, but you know, talking about incentivizing development or core. We have some parcels that seem to be very underutilized in our urban core. And they will perpetually be that way. Right now I'm thinking of the Brightspeed and Comcast and everything's obviously hotel. I'm just wondering, has there ever been any thought to hiring someone to make a workable concept for these parcels to just show that this property is worth a whole lot? Can you sell it and do it, like get some pre-approved plan or something and it incentivizes? I don't know what your face means, Jeff.
Mitch Matthews haven't tried it.
Well, I mean, no one's ever touched these two, and I mean, but yeah, Mitchell Matthews is, yes, they've been doing this on a couple of parcels. But they've been doing it on their own dime, and I'm just wondering if maybe that's if the city ever would consider if we've got some spots that just won't ever develop.
Point somebody at it and say feasibility of this.
Yeah, show what this is worth and show that it's worth not sitting on. So, I mean, I don't know what type of switch gear they have in these buildings, but it seems like
That
there's-
Brightspeed building is the hub for the whole region. I don't think it's
oh, God.
Yeah.
The one across from Pete's?
Yeah,
Yeah,
not until you're an accountant or finally retire
yeah, no,
it, which is happening.
our building folks have had some experience with that. It is a prime infrastructure for that.
So the whole thing is full of,
Things,
okay.
yeah.
Well, that was helpful Comcast as well. That building's even worse.
What's the hell? Yes, well,
It's right next to the old bus station. It's a little one-story thing. It's next to the parking lot for
Yeah, yeah,
the Main Street Market.
Yeah,
It's completely nondescript.
it has
and
windows, but
horrible.
they're not
Paper,
used,
yeah,
they're like,
papered over. Correct.
yeah.
Anyways, that
block
was
that
sorry.
out of my
Off
brain.
topic.
Right past it.
I think about that
That
every
could
time I
be-
walk down West Main Street.
Maybe that's a different small area.
Oh, well, we've had those.
I don't remember what. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really, I've just heard tangentially people thinking about projects, so I don't. I don't think I've heard anything major. I have being with the tree commission people. Who we know are pretty hardcore. The tree permit issue is big and various other things they'd like to add.
I just looked and there have been 4 tree permits filed. I'm guessing we've had more trees cut down since January.
Oh, does those show up on that website?
Yeah, everything shows on the website.
Okay,
It's a blast.
that's my.
I look at it like every other day.
He does.
Before he wakes up.
I do, yeah. It's not even on this yet.
It's like,
I see those
what's going on
documents.
Like, how did you see that? It hasn't even been like checked off yet.
Anyway, I don't know, I lost my train of thought somewhere.
Sorry. Tree permit.
Well,
Sorry.
tree, that just says, yeah, and, but yeah, I don't know in terms of the code. Kind of more here, yeah, hearing what any problems that have come up and. I'm interested to hear about that.
What the public, I'm sorry, I just think about the public
Yeah.
outreach part about those, we were talking about education, but I wonder if there's some of these early. Projects sort of embody the new zoning, I wonder if there's some, you sort of put together like first pass of the new zoning, we could just sort of do like a recap maybe to people, because I think the challenge is. In the next couple of years, some of the biggest, most high profile developments don't reflect the new zoning. And so there's gonna be a lot of confusion for people that when they see this large
I
project.
do have that thought.
So I was just
So-
curious if there's like a little takeaway, it could be a PDF or something that just sort of says. Yeah, like here's a project over, this neighborhood, and this another one, and just like 3 different scales of how this reflects the
Yeah.
new zoning opportunities could be.
Like a little newsletter.
Yeah, something, yeah.
I did have a thought, and this is probably just a future tangent, but alleys. That's all I have to say, alleys. Because I think a lot could be done with more clarity, obviously, and stuff, but 'cause I do live in Woolen Mills near the maybe some subplots, and yeah, it's like there's amazing stuff, but I don't think anyone knows who owns what, or, there's all sorts of
Oh, yeah.
complications, so
Oh, yeah.
if there was some kind of group working on identifying alleys that might be interested in getting,
You
you know,
guys have whole streets that are like secretly
Oh,
privately owned over there.
yes, yeah, the private street, yeah. Anyway, that's just something to put on the list of things that might preclude
It's on
someone.
our list. It's on your list.
It could be,
Right, I did have one pain point that I had the opportunity to adjudicate a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
And this is development code 3.5.2.e subsection 9. And this has to do with homestays. The rule is that you've got to live in the homestay 185 days during the permit period. So during the permit period, you've got to actually have to physically be there 185 days. The applicant was appealing a denial by the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator denied it because the applicant already had a permit in place, or had a permit in place prior to seeking a renewal. But they could not document that they lived in that place 185 days. We voted 4-1 to side with the applicant, not the applicant, not because they were in compliance with the spirit of the rule, but they were in compliance with the letter of the law. What I would recommend we do in situations like this, in situations where an applicant has not met the obligation in the previous year, and they're asking to do it again, above and beyond the findings that we did, we leverage against them. I would recommend that we say, if you don't meet your obligation to live in the home 185 days, you get the fine, but on top of the fine, you're not allowed to apply for a permit for 5 years.
Or something.
Or a number like that.
So do we have in baked into the cake, a list of ways you can demonstrate you were there for
Yes.
185 days? What are they generally?
Well, no, we don't have that in the case. We don't have, people driving by checking to see if your car is parked out in front of them.
Well, I meant in terms of how would you document that you were there 150?
It's very difficult to do, and typically what happens is someone reports you as not having been there, and we had actually witnessed at our hearing, that's that the applicant had not been there. But again, this was in the previous year, than the year that we're in. I have no idea, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not sure how we would document that they've been there. But there are certain things that they have to do to prove that they own the house and that they have to be registered to vote.
Yeah, I mean, there are
and
things like,
that's-
well, for example, you know, I mean,
But there's
it's on
nothing
your
that-
taxes from, you know, is the.
Yeah, that's all, but
tax-
there's nothing to document.
Yeah, they're required to have-
Physically there.
They're required paperwork.
Do we even require like an actual like affidavit? That we could like
We,
set them up on perjury charges if they
I mean,
lie?
we did have a case where an affidavit was provided, concerning, living, and that was, you know, something that was accepted. Again, you know, there's a lot of on your honor with this. There are multitudes of cases of these. We, can only address the complaints because we have so many of those, and even those are super hard to investigate and move forward with, and it's just a really, really tough issue.
The argument that the applicant made was not that they had actually been there 185 days.
Clearly,
They said, when it read the rules, it just says to apply.
I promise that I'm gonna do
Right,
it this
yeah,
coming
and
year though.
We were like, you know, we can overrule these guys, and then the circuit court just gonna read the rule and say, nah, the rule says.
Yeah.
So I think if we added something that says you gotta, if in the previous year you haven't met your obligation, you gotta get the fine, I think it's up to $5,000.
But did we actually find them in that case?
I
I don't think we did.
I think we did,
And so-
I didn't bring all the reasons, but I think either he fined them or threatened to fine them, I'm not sure whether he did.
So maybe somewhere where you actually put a burden of, the burden of proof is on you to prove that you're there 185 days a year, which isn't really that hard if you turn on location services and Google on your phone and say, here's a history of where I slept and.
Here's where my phone
A little
was.
extreme. Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, I mean, it's-
If it's
People are getting very.
Yeah.
being rented out, wouldn't you have a list of how many people paid what days?
That would be
You would have that,
We
but you would still
require your
Like
link.
you were actually there, but at least it's showing you weren't renting it.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, I think probably just on vacancies alone, most Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I would assume are vacant, right? So, but that would be a start to require that.
I mean, this is a very, very challenging issue that's being looked at all over. Yes, the code will definitely need some sort of clarity. There were unvisited issues on this last time it was updated. We're just gonna have to see what the temperature is of the community and addressing that. As we recall from the last time we visited this, there's a lot of very passionate people on both sides.
I wonder though, for the issue in that specific ZTA case, or ZBA, BZA, which one are we,
BZA.
which one's the county? We're BZA, the county's ZBA. Yes, can we get that in on a separate track from a like wholesale homestay rewrite? Because that's gonna be a whole thing,
We get what on?
the like,
Clarification of the code.
the like,
You don't get to.
I
the
mean,
5-year
it-
ban or it's not just forward looking, you promising, it's.
I mean, it would be possible to bring forward something smaller than a wholesale. We don't know what would be, you know, what the discussion could go to, but you know, it is. possible
Yeah,
to
but
do
maybe
that.
if we did a small thing and said, we're gonna do a big thing, then, and don't snowball this time. Then maybe we can at least get that fixed without it spiraling into.
let's keep in mind, you buy a house and you intend, and you say to yourself, I know that mortgage company qualified me, but I really need to make an extra $800 a month.
Yeah.
Off of the accessory development, that I'm gonna Airbnb occasionally, and we
The
say.
accessory dwelling unit or accessory unit?
Exactly.
Additional.
Well, at $800 a month, it's both.
I'm not saying we require you to have lived there the previous year if you didn't own the house or anything.
Yeah, but that's not,
I
we
get the
have to sort
concern,
of,
yeah.
we have to sort of think through exactly how this, because.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and you have
I
somebody who
agree.
comes in with a completely innocuous situation, they're like, well, actually, I own that building and it was a rental.
Hmm.
But I've moved into it and I can establish that and no one doubts me on that, and I want an Airbnb.
So these are all
Yeah.
individual
Yeah,
analysis. Each one of these situations, they're individual,
Yeah.
they usually require research on, since there's so many platforms now online. Trying to figure out which ones they're on and what reporting has come through them, it's gotten very, very complex and, you know, the providers are not exactly very forthcoming to assist in enforcement.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough one.
I mean, but this is something that, you know, James has shared with me, and I've heard from everybody else in the department, you know, that it is a source of major concern and something that we need to address. So I'm looking forward to just really studying the issue, and I think also looking at maybe what some other localities are doing. From a regulatory perspective, but also from an enforcement perspective, and bringing forward some recommendations. So I think there's always an opportunity to try to, you know, take care of low hanging fruit and then come forward with something more comprehensive, but I'm kind of looking forward to getting a handle on what are the real problems and what are some potential options in terms of solutions, so.
I think if we could fix this small, I mean, this should not be that controversial.
But let me, maybe just make sure I understand, so you're saying recommendation that if you haven't met the requirement in the previous year, the residency requirement?
Yes,
While holding a permit.
while holding a permit, while holding a permit.
If you violate your permit in the previous year, at least as it pertains to the
Yeah,
residency
we
requirement.
suspend you for some
Well,
of the years.
wouldn't we still be in a situation of having to prove that they haven't met the requirement in the previous year?
We do, but again, in this case, they did not deny that they hadn't met the requirement. Their argument was, well, the rule says we get to apply anyway, because if we promise to be in the
well.
180.
It's also the tool in the toolbox. I mean, you know, you look at condominiums and their pet policies, right? You look at the weight of the dog, right? I had a condominium. Lived in a condominium where it was 50 pounds was the heaviest dog you can have. This did not mean that the managing agent went door to door with a bathroom scale looking for 51-pound dogs. But what it did is it sort of laid down a marker for, look, if you behave this way. And what it's really designed for is that if you have your 70-pound dog come barreling down the hallway and knock over a little old lady, you can now say,
These are the rules.
these are the rules, get Fido out of here.
Right, so, okay. Oh my God.
Sometimes they DNA test your dog so they can,
They
then
do-
DNA test the,
Yeah, they
and
absolutely
then
do.
they'll come after you,
Without
but,
fixing your dog. Nope, there are companies that do that on an express basis.
on that, while we're talking about the budget, there's been talk for some years of getting a third person in Reed's office to hopefully help with the load on that. And given that we make like, I think it was like 1.3 million a year off of Airbnb. Maybe that would be worth
You know,
doing
peel off a little bit.
before they're being overwhelmed and everyone's outraged at that, and so not getting any of that revenue.
Yes, I've heard that too. It's something that we'll be looking at.
So, Ms. Creasy, what else would you like to get done today?
That is what is on you guys' agenda. I will,
Can you maybe, let you finish up thought, but after you finish up thought, could you remind us when our next meetings are? We got a couple of other meetings.
you're reading my mind.
I'm sorry.
I love that, that's awesome. So we're looking to see where we're landing for October. We do not have a hearing in October. We have a couple of items that are on the bubble as to whether they would be ready or not. And if we just land with some of our things that can move to the next one, We may not have that. We're hoping to make that decision the end of this week, so you might get a night off early October. We shall see, but again,
I'd rather have a short meeting than a long meeting in November,
yeah, it's
if we can do that.
like a half hour meeting, like gather for
We've
half
done it
hour.
before.
Well, I don't think he means a half-hour meeting just to
Not
have the
do
meeting.
anything.
I think he means he'd rather, if there are a
Oh,
bunch of
yeah.
items,
Yes.
split them up.
Yeah, no, we're not,
Not just do a meeting for the sake of
We're
doing a
just-
meeting.
yeah, no, we're, where we are,
Seal it.
where we currently are with October is we would be having a meeting to have a meeting.
Okay.
Unless
Yeah.
one other thing comes in,
Right.
yeah, unless one other thing comes in.
Let's
which
just-
we-
yeah, so we just
Yes.
Do it. get it out.
But no, we don't want to have to create a long later either, so we're totally with you there. So we shall know soon, how that works itself out, and what it's looking for November would not be, overreaching. You know, massive items or lots of hearings or anything. Actually, I don't know that we have another hearing lined up for a little while. Again, the new code doesn't have as many requirements for that because we have so much flexibility. You know, by
I'm
right.
afraid for when the pipeline opens again. It's-
Well, you know, it is what it is.
We haven't had a 2 a.m. meeting in ages.
Oh, how
Had it so easy. We gotta haze the newbies.
Back in the day, Miss Creasy and I were before in the morning meetings, back in the
Yeah.
early 2000s.
We had, there was the summer of 2008, I believe, where we had 8 hearings in July and August.
Wow,
And,
then it all died.
well, it was something, so we're not looking at that right now, we'll see where we land. All right, so then after that, our next meeting would be October 29th. This would be the joint meeting over, at the county office building. This is the 5th Tuesday, not the 4th Tuesday, so just another reminder about that. And they're hosting us, and that'll be a presentation on the resilience project between city and county staff.
What
And,
is the deliverable that you guys are looking for from us?
I believe there will be some feedback, that they'll be requesting, and that there'll be some questions that you all will come in to prepare your thought patterns for that presentation, and so, yeah, that we haven't yet gathered again on that, but that was our initial meeting to, you know, make there be a goal besides just coming together and getting to know our colleagues a little bit.
You gotta be nice to the county commissioners. They meet with us again in less than 5 years.
Oh, goodness. We did have that COVID thing in between.
That's true.
And
I feel like
they,
they stopped before that.
and they've been having an awful lot of fun with their comp plan and all their zoning changes, so, you know.
That's gonna be at 5 o'clock.
That will be at 5:30. We split the difference. They usually meet at 6, we meet at 5, we split to 5:30, so. November, we have a regular meeting on the 12th. That's our normal meeting. We will have a few items for that one for sure. And then the 26th, as we're preparing for Thanksgiving, will be our CIP work session.
Exciting.
Yes.
Do we have other work sessions planned in the midterm future? Zoning stuff.
We do not at the moment, but we will be working our way to that. For December, I decided Christmas Eve, we were not gonna meet. I figured everyone would be kind of okay with that. And then, you know,
Well,
so,
Christmas Eve is a Tuesday, then the 31st is also Tuesday.
well, okay. Sounds like another fun meeting, Kate. Sure, we'll get a quorum then. Yeah, so I figure, you know, we're not drowning in a zoning code like we were last November, December, January, so we'll be able to spend a bit more planning time. Kelly will have her feet wet a little bit more, or hopefully we'll have a few other things going, and we'll be able to plan out some other work sessions for the new year.
Bill. Sir. You wanna take us home?
Well, I'm glad we were able to get some more clarity on some issues here, and I look forward to more. It's a good night to do that, because this is the 95th anniversary in the history of the world of flying blind. The very first instrument-only aircraft flight took place on September 24th. If that's not good enough for you, I'd also like to point out that it's National Punctuation Day, period. Let's go home.
Oh, thank you. We are adjourned.
I thought that was an appropriate one. I always hesitate. Never know what we're gonna get.